Hey guys, I was just gonna go over some quick sanding tips for you guys. I've got some different grits of sandpaper here. We've got 220, 320, 400, and 600. Oops. Sorry. This one's a little bit used with brass, but still very good. So the full sheet looks like this. This is waterproof paper. You can rinse any of this gunk out and it'll kind of refresh your sandpaper, and then you could keep going. The lower the number, the coarser the grit. So 220, you can see, has a lot more texture than 600, which you're actually seeing just an embossment on there, but it's actually quite smooth. And this is generally the grit that you're going to be sanding up to before you do a polish, but this would be that finish that we're all looking for, that nice satiny finish. And 220 is going to be the grit to really hog away at a lot of, the rough sanding needs. So I have a little sample here. It was a sample that I was kind of cutting from, and I scalloped the edge, and I don't know if you can see, but there's definitely a pretty high burr from sawing all the way around. And so I'm actually gonna knock that down with the 220. Now, I don't think I have enough deep gouges in this metal to warrant me starting with 220, because anytime you use sandpaper, the coarser it is, the more scratches you're actually putting in. It's just consistent scratches all at the same depth. And then as you move up onto the next sandpaper grit, you're putting in new scratches that just aren't as deep, and so they're removing the older, deeper scratches. So every time you move up from 220 to 320 to 400 and 600, you're just putting in new scratches, and those scratches are, they're just replacing the old ones. And they're not as deep, they're just all consistent, which is why we want to sand directionally. So every grit that we change to, we're gonna change the direction of sanding. So I do have some scratches on here, but I'm gonna try to get it out with the 320, because the 220 is really aggressive. I would use it on like edges if we had a lot of chatter. I can use my little sanding stick that I've made. If I maybe wanted to bevel an edge ever so slightly, not enough that I maybe needed a file, or I just wanted to round it out a bit, then maybe I'd go with the 220, but I think 320 is more than enough for this surface that doesn't have any deep scratches. So I'm gonna start going in this direction. little scratches here and here that I want to remove. So sanding comes after filing. I'm going to do the back as well because you should always do the back. Maybe not up to the like 600 grit finish because maybe that's not how you want it finished, but you know, especially in jewelry, the front is just as important as the back, which is just as important as the side. If there's an inside, so we want to hit all the surfaces. Plus there are a ton of burrs from cutting, so I want to remove all of that. I would recommend at this point, I'm not wearing one because you wouldn't be able to hear me, but a dust mask, because there are fine particulates. You can kind of see them. They're gonna kind of puff up in the air. So I would wear a dust mask. Make sure you vacuum, and I would even do like a wet wipe down of all your surfaces after working with this medium, especially if you're in a space around children or pets or food. If you're working on or near your dining area. Please don't have any open containers of liquid that you're consuming. So this looks nice. I'm pretty happy with that. So from there, we're actually going to move on to the 400 grit, which I don't have a little piece already cut out, so I'm going to cut one on my larger piece. The way I generally cut or rip sandpaper is I don't want to use a pair of scissors if I don't have to, because it will dull your blades like immediately, and I find that incredibly annoying. So we just rip it, and I tore it in a place where it doesn't tell me what grit it is, so I'm gonna write it in so I don't forget. Now we were going, however which way you're holding it, we'll say horizontally. There are the striations, and now I'm gonna move it vertically. So basically I'm creating cross hatches. Now you can see we've got lines going in both directions now. So if I were to stop there, now we have 320 and 400 grit lines. If that's a finish that you're going for, then that's different, but that is not what I want. I want it to be consistent and beautiful in one direction, and I want it to all be sanded. I want the surface to be sanded to 600 grit. So I try to avoid applying the majority of the pressure around the edges, because generally that's what's going to happen. It's a drop-off point, so you know, wherever is the path of least resistance is where kind of the pressure is going to end up. And that means that there is a chance that you're going to be sanding that area more than the rest, which would then cause the edge to be softened, which may or may not be what you're going for, but if it's not, it's gonna happen. So I try to avoid the edges because either way you're gonna end up hitting it. And that's basically how you sand. Make sure you go from coarse to fine, and make sure you're going in the same direction with each grit, and then opposite direction when you move on to the next grit. And yeah, that's it. From here, if this was my final finish, I would go and wash it and dry it immediately, make sure it's nice and dry, and then I would wax it. If I was gonna rivet it, then I would have drilled all of my holes, made sure it was the right shape, sanded it, and then you can wax it and then assemble it, or you can assemble it and then wax it.